Hi, morning everyone. Thank you for coming on a Sunday morning and welcome to day 2 of Sustainable Fashion Week. I'm Olivia and this session is called A Different Story, and we're talking all about reuse, reloving, repairing, swapping, renting clothing. Unfortunately, Ishita hasn't been able to join us today for the panel, but we do have Alex and Sam, so it's going to be perfect. I got a name wrong, didn't I then? Yeah, a little bit. What? Go on, Alex and Hannah. Sorry, there you go. Sunday morning for you. Alex and Hannah with us today. So we're going to be talking here for about an hour. We've got about half an hour, 45 minutes of us chatting, and then we're going to go open to Q&A for you guys to ask questions, because this is all about community listening and learning together. So I want your voices to be heard in this. So be thinking of questions now, so it's not a dead silence, and we'll go from there. So to start with, I'm going to just let both Alex and Hannah introduce themselves, what you do, your journey to get in there, and kind of, what you're working on now.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, you go.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is my first time doing this, so please bear with me. Hi, I'm Alex. So I work at New, it's NUW, which is the app to swap preloved fashion. I had a bit of a weird journey getting there. So I'm a self-confessed previous fast fashion addict. Feels very much like a AA meeting when I say that. But I used to do ASOS orders on a weekly basis. I used to shop at Boohoo. This jacket's from Nasty Gal, so that tells you how bad it was. And then I just completely realized that this wasn't for me and knew that I wanted to explore a slower approach to fashion. And then I found New and started working there. And it basically just completely opened my eyes as to what a kind of disaster the fast fashion industry is, and how we can slow things down in a much easier and very, very affordable way. And so, I hate to say it changed my life, but changed my life a little bit. So now I work there as a communications manager. We've been running a swapping platform for about a year now. We were originally doing borrowing and sharing wardrobes, and then the pandemic hit, and obviously no one's going out or borrowing anything to go anywhere. So we completely pivoted our model, focusing on swaps. It works really easily. You basically upload something from your wardrobe that you just don't love anymore, you don't reach for. You upload it onto the app and you get a token, and you can then use that token to swap with anything else that you like on the platform, basically. So £1 per swap, pretty easy, just an easier way to access a slower model of fashion. And it's been really fun. We're working a lot. We're still very new, excuse the pun. But yeah, the app is growing. It's really exciting and it's a fun time, and we're just really happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am Hannah, and I am one of the founders of Looped. So Looped, our mission is to reduce textile waste, and we're doing that through a platform for upcycle designers. So we'll host a range of designers based in the UK and the EU, and they will focus on upcycling. But we want to kind of move away from crafty. All of these designers, qualified designers who can create really high quality garments. It's just that they use alternative materials or materials that are already in circulation. So my story into Looped started when I moved from from Australia to the UK. I got involved in activist work. I organised a protest in Oxford Circus where we shut it down and we turned it into a catwalk, a sustainable catwalk, and I organised a few protests as well. I started to find out how bad the textile industry is in fashion, and my habits were changing. And I was fortunate enough to meet with quite a few brands who were saying they were changing and they were doing this and they were doing that. But I feel like sometimes in activist work, there's so much pressure on the consumer and there's not enough alternatives. So myself and my 2 founders, who were also activists, decided to create a solution for people who love fashion, but they want something a little bit extra. For people who, sometimes resale's great, but sometimes you want something a little bit, a bit more pizzazz or something extra, and upcycling gives people that option. So we launched in about 3 months. It's been quite a journey from concept to we've got a lot of backing. We got into a program in Milan off the back of a concept, and the platform's in development. And yeah, really excited to be here, really excited to be on this panel. I'm excited for your questions and to meet everyone. So thank you.
Awesome, very cool. Thank you very much. So can I ask, that by platform that you're developing, is it going to be app-based? Is it going to be website? How's it going to work?
Yeah, so it's website. So there'll be, each designer has their own store, and there'll be a vetting procedure just to make sure complete transparency and that everything is genuinely resale and upcycled. And yeah, there'll be about 50 to start with, and then upwards to about 200 as we go on.
Amazing. And one more quick question.
Yeah.
You said UK and EU, so is it going to be just UK based to start with, or are you going to immediately kind of go European and grow?
Yeah, so ideally European and grow. We will make sure that everything is delivered by land. So if we do go international, it'll be separate localized hubs. We don't believe that anything should be transported by ship or by air. We want to make sure that, I think in fashion, you have to look at the bigger picture, so everything will be as sustainable as we can be. But yeah, I think the EU's got a lot of designers, and upcycling is really kind of new. It's only just been named like the biggest trend of 2021. So I think we want to kind of give the options and, you know, bring it into the forefront.
That's amazing. Thank you. And that actually leads me perfectly on to my first question, which is, can clothing rentals and things like this really be sustainable when it leads to kind of increased packaging, increased travel of clothing, and that shipment that we've seen so much of in COVID-19, everything swapped to online delivery. So how can something that feeds into that be truly sustainable? What do you think?
I'll go for it. Yeah, I think there was a recent article in The Guardian that came out that was looking at how resale was not sustainable, and like you're supposed to hold on to your stuff. It's better to throw it in the bin, I think was probably a paraphrase, but definitely a quote that was in there. And I think that's kind of looking at like the bigger picture of those large fashion brands that are like looking into their own platforms of resale and their own platforms of rental. Which again is producing new items that are designed to be rented out or designed to be sold on, but ultimately probably won't last that long. One thing that we do at New is we are peer-to-peer. So we focus on a complete just community of people who are sharing. We prefer people to meet up in person or do like bike deliveries instead of the kind of cost of like shipping or sending anything by post. So while I completely get that when big brands do this kind of thing, that they are kind of just adding to the issue that we're trying to fight in the first place, it's exciting to see like smaller models who are taking on more concentrated, more local projects and more local platforms that mean that people can enjoy slower fashion without adding on to the extras of postage, shipping, manufacturing. That's going to really add on that kind of bill for the planet, really. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, just to echo what you've said, but I think also we shouldn't make people feel guilty about enjoying fashion. And there are things that come with that, which is transportation, etc. But I guess the companies should be transparent, look for the most sustainable option, and then what you can't offset. Like there is always going to be aspects of everything that isn't necessarily sustainable, but one of the best ways that you can participate in fashion and be ethical and sustainable is resale, is upcycling. And if shipping's a part of it, just make sure it's the best sustainable way possible.
Brilliant. No, that makes complete sense. So I've touched on COVID and you've touched on the fact that upcycling has been named one of the biggest trends of 2021. So what do you think has caused this resurgence in pre-loved fashion, in reworking, in reusing, kind of all these quite traditional ideas, really? What do you think has made it popular again?
Yeah, I think what we've seen in the last couple of years is just an abundance of information on the fashion industry. People are way more aware, people care. And I think also what was happened with COVID was the global south not being paid by the major fashion brands, and that was, widely publicized. So I think people are looking for alternatives. I think COVID also encouraged people to be more creative and try and upcycle. And I think we're starting to just value things a little bit more. And yeah, it's just a bit of a combination of all of those, I guess.
I think as well, like during COVID, everyone was just spending all their time at home looking at their wardrobe and thinking, wow, I can't wear half of this right now. I'll stick to my sweats. And it gave people that kind of opportunity almost to like slow down and really make informed decisions about like, okay, well, why do I have all this random stuff in my wardrobe that I'm not going to wear? And think about new ways that they can work with that, and whether that's through upcycling or if that's through saying, well, I'm just going to have a massive clear out Go Marie Kondo on it and just decide that I don't use this anymore. I'll donate it or I'll swap it or again, upcycle it. So I think we've had just a really good opportunity to slow everything down, refresh everything. I know Depop like grew by 3 figures or something in their usage, just because people are looking at it as an alternative source of income. But yeah, I think obviously COVID sucked, but there's definitely that silver lining where we've seen that nice slowdown of pace. We've seen people really reflect on their actions and their attitudes towards the fashion industry. And do like create these awesome projects and come up with really unique and like special ways to really use what people already have.
Perfect. So do you think that slowing down will continue as the world begins to open up and people will still have the time to kind of do these things?
I hope so. I think one of the scariest things was like the first month of COVID where like online shopping increased by like 75% or something. It's like, why are you buying a boob tube from Boohoo? Like, where are you going? Like at this time where no one could leave. So I think it's definitely kind of reset our minds as to our approach to fashion and how we think about things. I'd love to see this be a continued thing. I think it's all about education really, and people have learned a lot over the last year and a half. So I'm hoping that's something that definitely continues. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think there's an abundance of really cool platforms like New Loot, but there are so many other key players in the fashion industry who are popping up and providing sustainable solutions that make it a little bit easier to continue to participate. You might not have the extra free time, but there's a tailor app that will do that for you, or there is a designer that you admire who can take your old jeans and upcycle it into a jacket for you. You don't necessarily have to do it. There's a lot of solutions which make it easier for you.
Brilliant. So that, again, leads perfectly onto my next question. Is like, what I'm going to ask, which is, so how do you feel new technologies, may they be app-based things, the internet, website, have helped kind of reinvigorate these traditional ideas and make things more accessible? So, yeah, I suppose, how do you think that's happened? And what do you think is next to come with that?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people who have worked in fashion or care about fashion and they've been disillusioned with the industry. So they're going, you know what, I'm going to do something about it, and they're coming up with these new technologies. I mean, fashion, it contributes more than maritime and shipping, and there needs to be another way. So I think that's really the reason that people are doing it. Also, the EU passed the law where all brands are now accountable for any of their materials and their offcuts and their returns. They can't burn it anymore, which obviously we know infamously Burberry did. So brands are looking for solutions, consumers are looking for solutions, designers are looking for solutions, and technology is the way to provide an alternative.
Yeah, I think like the whole "there's an app for that" has definitely become like the go-to phrase. But I think it's so inspiring to see different forms of tech and different platforms that are embodying these really old kind of ways of being sustainable, if you will. So like borrowing from a friend, like swapping with like co-workers or anyone, like these are all really old methods that people used to be sustainable before. Like being sustainable was probably like a phrase, like upcycling and taking a look at your jeans and thinking, wow, these need to be better for me. These are all old frames of thought. I think technology is just kind of a way of making that more accessible and making that more inspiring for like younger generations to explore these old habits and these old techniques to really kind of make them their own and make them like the cool new fashion that you see today. Like it's not all about the latest garments that you see at Zara or H&M that have just hit the floors. It's about like kind of creating something that's unique and individual and it's your own. And yeah, I think technology is kind of just the new way to do that now.
Brilliant. So you touched on accessibility in there as well. So I kind of have two questions that I'm going to try and blur into one that makes sense. So my first thought quite a lot of the time, unless it's my mum tailoring something for me, at which she'll do it for free, but she'll do it when she gets time. Sometimes that can be an expense that I can't afford, depending on, you know, who you go to and where you live. So I suppose, do you think upcycling, tailoring, is at a price point that everyone can access? And then the other thing with that is with secondhand and kind of swapping and sharing, obviously when I was younger, I felt like I did much more secondhand shopping than I do now, which I probably shouldn't admit. And I felt like I couldn't necessarily find the sizes or of things that fitted my body type. And if you're promoting kind of sharing within an immediate community of people, do you feel like you're creating that community where everyone can share between each other because they're mirrored in some way? So that is two questions, but thoughts.
Can we go with the first part and I'll go with the second part?
Yeah. I guess like size inclusivity and sustainability is something that's always brought up. We aim and we're hoping to have a very inclusive range on our platform. We are not quite launched yet, so it's a bit hard, early for me to jump the gun and, make these claims, but we do want that, and I think it is a really important thing. In terms of the price point, sometimes you have to pay more for sustainable items. All of our designers will be in the UK and the EU. They deserve to get paid a fair wage, and fashion doesn't pay people a fair wage a lot of the time. So we have to change that, and it's about changing your mindset. Rather than go to fast fashion place and buy, 5 T-shirts, buy one and pay a little bit more. I think we have to change our mindset and we have to change our values in order to make a more ethical fashion industry. So I guess, is that kind of, on that way, and then I'll pass it over to you.
I think one of the things that we have to think about is instead of asking why is sustainable fashion or ethically made fashion so expensive, it's more why is fast fashion so cheap in the first place?
Yeah.
It's expensive to make things, and there's someone behind everything that we're wearing today who deserves to be paid that amount. So I completely back this. But then you have obviously the mindset of I can't afford sustainable fashion, or I can't afford something that's ethically made. And I think when you have $80 Zara hauls going around from influencers and everything to say look at all these things that I got for $80, why don't you just maybe take that money that you've spent on all these things, which may just end up in the bin in a year's time, invest in something that's good quality, that's designed to last, and that means that the person who was produced that item is well paid, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess, swapping apps do make it a lot more affordable as well. I think you have to find balance, and we need to change our values, and that's the most important thing. Yeah, and basically, and we need to pay our workers a fair wage.
I think as well, like you're saying with accessibility, one thing that fast fashion is so appealing for is that it stocks a variety of sizes and caters to all different body types. Unfortunately, I think with some slower fashion brands, it is more limited. So I know with peer-to-peer, we're always interested in making sure that everyone is catered to. We're not providing items that only fit a select few. This is designed for everyone to be able to use, and we'll do regular call outs. We had a plus size swap event at I think it was in June actually, but it was just to really advertise that this isn't just for people who fit traditionally smaller sizes. This is for people who fit in sizes 18 to 30, and this is for anyone who really enjoys fashion, just wants to enjoy it in a slower way. We're not limiting who can do that. We want to make sure that this is for everybody, and that no one's excluded from this, because this is not something that we should be excluding anyone from. This is important, and this is an ethical and slower way to think about things, and that's a universal thing for everybody. It's not for the few.
Something that we want to roll out as well is where people can reimagine their own wardrobe. So, for instance, you've got 5 pairs of jeans and they've got a hole or they're no longer wearing. You can send that to a designer with your measurements and you can get it turned into a jacket or you can get it turned into a really cool denim dress. So that way you can be a lot more inclusive because you've got your measurements and you're providing the materials, so it's instantaneously cheaper, and then you're paying the designer for their labour.
Awesome. That's very cool. I will be doing that, and my mum will be very pleased because it normally comes to her in the post of, can you turn this dress into a crop top and a skirt? And she's like, no, I can't, but it comes back to me, which is the main thing. So I think we've kind of answered this question, but I'd just like to expand on it a bit more. Do you think there is still a stigma around secondhand clothing and kind of wearing that and using it? And if not, how and why do you think that's changed?
I think, I know I definitely had a stigma against it. If that's the right phrasing. Yeah. Yes. I know that I had friends who shopped in charity shops and I didn't like it. Like I thought, oh, like that's old clothes and this isn't fashionable and I'm not going to shop there. I'm going to go to H&M. But one thing that I definitely realized is that you can basically find anything in a charity shop, and it's not that it's some like horrible moth-eaten thing that's falling apart. Like these things have been selected so that they can be resold. And so it's really cool to see. I think this changed definitely when Depop came around, and it was kind of making secondhand fashion cool, and it was making finding old retro styles cooler again. And I think with sorry, I keep touching my microphone. With Gen Z now is kind of embracing that in that it's unique things that you can find and it's ways of adding to your wardrobes that is affordable, but it's also you don't know what you're going to find. Like you can go into Primark and say, I'm just going to get like a plain t-shirt, but you can go into a charity shop or you can look on Depop or you can look on New or anything and just kind of explore what's available to you and pick something that suits your style. It's kind of like more open mindset. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, I think there is a stigma for some people, but for others not. I've always shopped in charity stores, a combination between the two, just because, I mean, we've got some great ones in Australia, and actually New Zealand's got some amazing charity stores, but I went on a tour there and I stopped at all of them. But I think that is changing. I think one of the reasons stigmas come is because fashion tells us what's on trend. And I think if you're someone who wants to constantly be wearing the latest thing that's in fashion, it's harder to shop at charity stores. But as you've kind of mentioned, I think what is quite prevalent now is like embracing your own style and wearing your unique style is what you can get from charity stores. And so I think because of that and like individuality and, you know, kind of, I think social media has aided this as well. For that reason, I think that there's, again, I guess, been a resurrection of vintage as well.
Brilliant. So that comes again to my next question. And I read this article a few years ago now, so I might be outdated, but I feel like it's still true. As secondhand shopping and charity shop shopping becomes more popular, do you think, and is there the risk that it therefore becomes more expensive and inaccessible to the people who need it? So charity shops are there for, you know, they serve a purpose in society, and I've definitely seen a shift in certain areas what Oxfam looks like. It doesn't look like, not that it should look like Oxfam anymore, but it doesn't price like Oxfam anymore in certain areas. So do you see that happening, and how can we prevent something that is great in a lot of ways and is doing service kind of, you know, having that unintended negative impact?
Massively. I think that's not new. I think that's been happening for about 10 years or longer. I think fashion, I'm not sure how you combat that. I think that's a really tricky thing. But I guess certain platforms that like Depop and Vinted and Looped that make it more for the people who are interested in fashion, and then there is charity stores that are there for people that need it. It's a really tricky one to say how you combat that. But, you know, that's why I think we have to keep coming up with more solutions so that it is inclusive for everyone and it doesn't take away from the people who really need charity stores. But at the end of the day, like, we need to start moving towards a second-hand world, because at the end we've got too much garments. And I mean, at the moment, 1% of garments are actually recycled. So yeah, I guess there's just going to be a lot more options, and I guess if there's more options in the second-hand world, then it can cater to everyone. Yeah.
So if every store on the high street was a second-hand one, we wouldn't need to worry about these things. I suppose.
Exactly.
Lovely. Yeah, I think while the goal is obviously to keep charity shops to be essentially what they are, like they're shops where you can pay money and that goes to charity and you get something nice from it, and that's great. But I think at the end of the day, you do vote with your wallet. So you can go to a charity shop and you can spend your money there and know that it's going to a good cause and you also get something out of it. Or you can choose different platforms for resale and exploring secondhand fashion that is maybe not as costly. New is one of those. Like there's lots of platforms, there's lots of places where you can enjoy fashion really affordably and not have to have it cost an arm and a leg to enjoy something. But yeah, I think whilst fast fashion does get cheaper, charity shops will get more expensive. So it is looking at kind of from an individual perspective, like, are we able to continue voting with our wallet if charity shops become inaccessible, and if we go down to Oxfam and we don't see anything in our size or that we can afford, like what's the next thing that we can do? And I think it's great that we are now seeing the resurgence of secondhand platforms and places where you can get things that are more suited to your price range, but they're also not negatively impacting the environment in any way. Well, as much.
Yeah, cool, thank you. So another question I have, and I'm sorry, this is another hard one, then I'll go for an easy one, is, so you've spoken about garment workers, and yesterday we had a talk specifically on the exploitation of garment workers, and secondhand is great, but there's the flip side of that where it's taking away incomes of individuals, families, and whole economies that are built on that. So that's kind of been flagged as an issue. And I appreciate that reworking and upcycling, they're kind of just growing at the moment. So there's not that shift in power in balance yet. But if it's been flagged as something on the horizon that could be problematic, how can we make sure that doesn't have the kind of large scale negative impact that it could, is that what happens?
I think one thing that we look at when we enjoy secondhand fashion is to know that we are appreciating the person who made the garment. It's not just being able to say, oh, I got this from wherever and it was secondhand and it was this affordable to me. It's now finding that new love and that new appreciation for that item that you've now taken into your wardrobe, and knowing that it was worth all of the work that was put into it to create it. So while we can enjoy secondhand fashion, the flip side of the coin basically is that you now need to demand change for garment workers. It can't just be enjoying the clothes that you get for secondhand. It's now also writing to brands and demanding living wages to all these people. I know the Bangladesh Accord, which is a document signed by brands to ensure garment worker safety and unionization over in the global south, it has been a massive thing. And I know that being in this kind of world and in this sustainable fashion like little bubble, this is like everything, and it's what we push, but it's something that a lot of people still don't really know about. So yeah, I think whilst one way is that we can enjoy secondhand fashion and we can make sure that we're not adding to the social environmental cost, it's also recognizing that there is change to be made. There is a long way to go in getting justice for garment workers and getting them to be paid a literal living wage. So it's making sure that we're not alienating one side. These two things kind of go together, and if we're doing one thing, then we have to be doing the other, because otherwise these people are just being lost, and we don't want anything like that to happen. We don't want these people to lose their income. We don't want people to lose their rights. We want to make sure that this is still being protected, and maybe we can enjoy brands if they are protecting their garment workers and if they are creating sustainable materials from a completely transparent supply chain. It's just that they're not at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard thing, and it is really up to governments to implement solutions. But I don't think resale and secondhand and upcycling is ever going to overtake new completely. But, we've talked about potential future plans being able to incorporate recycled brands onto the platform. And if that was the case, then we could look and make sure that we're working with the Global South and that is an inclusive thing. But at this point in time, we don't see a way that we can incorporate that into our business model. But I just think, new and is always going to exist. Upcycling and resale is never going to overtake that. So I guess those conversations, I don't see how we can, I'm not sure really what else to add to that.
No, that makes complete sense. That's absolutely perfect. Thank you. And then I think I've got one more question for you guys, and I'm going to open up to the floor. So have your ones ready. So you've mentioned there that rework and secondhand is kind of never going to overtake new. So not that there should be a hierarchy, but if there was a hierarchy, or if you were putting together some puzzle pieces of what sustainable fashion industry should look like, kind of what are the key parts, and where do you think, if there's a most important piece to that puzzle, what do you think it is?
Ooh. So one other thing I was going to say is, so actually by 2029, the secondhand resale market is set to overtake new fashion by like 1.5 times or something like that. So it does look like we are kind of heading towards that more sustainable future, and that future where secondhand isn't thought of as like a niche, it's kind of thought of as a given. I think it's expected that 10 to 20% of people's wardrobes will be used clothing, and it will be fashion that wasn't purchased new. So it's exciting to think that we are moving in that direction. And again, like we are seeing like so many cool platforms that are really enjoying fashion and appreciating fashion that already exists. So while I don't see Oxford Street turning into a line of secondhand stores anytime soon, I think it is promising that especially with this latest generation, we are seeing a pivot towards slower approaches and kind of pushing away, just rejecting fast fashion. I think UCAS did a study that was looking at like around 70% of students or something like that just don't plan on shopping fast fashion anymore. Like that's just not appealing to them. And I think as this generation matures, we're now going to see an evolution in attitudes towards fashion that is something exciting, especially for us.
Yeah, I think it's just about making conscious, informed decisions, about celebrating creativity. Upcycling is a way to do that. It's a way to support independent designers. It's a way to still participate in fashion, but through a more sustainable lens. So I just think it's really exciting that there's all these incredible designers and brands and startups that are popping up to support that and provide alternatives. I just think there will be a lot of brands are trying to look for more sustainable ways to produce, and I think it's about just holding them accountable, asking for transparency, and if you ask the questions, brands eventually have to answer, and that's a way to kind of make sure that we're all moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. That's been amazing. So I will open it up to some questions from you guys. If you have any hands? Yeah, definitely.
I have a burning question. But I don't really have the words for it because I don't think that it's talked about very much, like the link between mental health and fashion. You spoke about in the first month of COVID, there was all these people shopping online, and that's clearly because people's mental health was struggling. They were like, when you can't control what's happening outside, you try and control what's happening inside. And then on the other side, like fashion and creativity and expressing yourself, like that can be a really positive thing for your own mental health. So yeah, I'm just interested if you could talk about the link or how your companies are talking about that.
Definitely. I mean, retail therapy as a term exists for a reason. But one thing that we found is that it's less about that joy you get when you buy something new. It's excitement when you own something that's new to you. Like it doesn't have to come from a fast fashion brand, or it doesn't have to come from a slow brand. It's more that new feeling of ownership and knowing that this is now mine and I get to now explore that. But on the same side, I know that kind of having kind of like guilt with shopping is horrible. Like no one wants that. And I think when we learn about like the fashion industry and like garment workers, and we have all this information going in our heads, it can feel very it can make you feel very small and make you feel like there's not much I can do here, which is horrible. So I think one of the things that we want to make sure people are doing is discovering like a new love for what already exists in the world, and trying to do their bit that they can, but also knowing that we can do our bit, but we're never going to be able to change the entire world overnight, you know. So it's kind of looking at our attitudes towards fashion and towards resale and towards like getting that new thing with less guilt and with more empowerment, and knowing that we can consciously make an effort to change, and we can enjoy things without this guilt, or without continuing to feel crap because you don't have like that new thing or that new buzz. There's other ways that we can do this, and especially with, I think, like being able to put our creativity into creating something new, and discovering like different talents that we have, or anything that we like with fashion is an exciting thing to do.
Yeah.
Gently passes over to upcycling.
Yeah, and I think that's why I wanted to create Loop, because I felt disillusioned with the industry, but I like fashion, and I didn't want to go out and not have something new sometimes. Or, you know, I might go to a wedding and sometimes you can't find the right thing secondhand, and you just want something that extra, and you don't want to go and feel guilty because you've shopped on the high street, but then I don't want to go and feel like I'm not as dressed up as everyone because I'm trying to not partake in the world of fashion. So that's why we wanted to create upcycling, a platform that upcycles, where people can stop feeling guilty and participate in fashion, because all of these materials are already in circulation. We're saving them from landfill. We're giving them a new life. And then also you can, you know, follow these designers and, you know, encourage, like, wear something unique, follow these designers who are incredibly talented, and fall in love with their art, with their creativity, and then you also kind of add more value to it that way. But yeah, I think it's a tricky thing in fashion. Notoriously makes us feel certain ways. It makes us sometimes feel like we're not partaking in it, or we're not dressed well enough, and then it also sometimes gives us this radical joy. I think there'll always be that, but I think finding it through a more sustainable lens is a way to make yourself feel empowered.
Does that answer the question a bit? Brilliant.
So, as we've been used to fast fashion always being there with multiple collections per season, in the future, how are we going to tackle that immediate demand of consumers?
Do you want to go? Shall I go? I think you're right. I think it's crazy how we used to refer to like fashion as like seasons, because it would literally happen once every 4 months, and now you get like 200 new lines dropping every week. And I think that kind of intense like production of fashion and like the massive like buy, wear, dispose cycle that all goes into is just something that really needs to slow down. But I think one thing that we can take advantage of with that is that whilst all these clothes are being produced, we can now take them and we can give them new homes. That means there's like, I think it's 80 to 100 billion clothes that are being produced per year. And there's only, 75 billion of us here or something like that. So maybe there's less, I can't remember. So we already know that there's that stupid amount of clothes that exist. It's more about like kind of giving them purpose and being able to rehome them, repurpose them, upcycle, make use of what already exists. And the idea will be that fast fashion does need to slow down. Fast fashion needs to catch up in that. This is the new mindset. We are using what already exists. We can't keep overproducing, because all these things just end up in landfill at the end of the day. So while it's great to see platforms that are taking items that already exist and making them into something new, or like rehoming them, we have secondhand shops, of course. The idea is basically fast fashion does need to chill out for a sec, basically.
Yeah, and I think also we need to move away from trends. We need to embrace creativity, embrace our unique style. But upcycling does give you the freedom to change your style a bit more freely. You might have something that you are never going to wear again. For instance, low waist jeans or something like that, and you can get them turned into a dress. I don't know, but there are ways that you can do that and change your style through upcycling. But also, we just need to move away from being told by these trends reports what we wear and just go, you know what? This is what I like. I love this designer. I think they're really cool, and I'm going to wear them. And we need to just be a bit more sure of our own fashion choices, I think. And that's a way to kind of combat that. Like, you don't need to wear what Zara tells you. Wear what you want. Yeah.
And I think that links quite well to the mental health question as well, and that kind of need to buy and need to satisfy. They're very interlinked. And I think, one solves the other or feeds into the other. So I think there's a connection there for sure. Did I see another hand that came up? Yeah. Let's go red and then black.
I was just wondering, in terms of teenagers, there's lots of social pressure to kind of have a new outfit for every party. How do you think that should be almost removed? Because it's all about saying we should just stop following trends, but teenagers don't really care. They kind of just want to keep going with it.
I think it's kind of like transforming the idea of trends into just something that's like cool. So like I can wear the jazziest random jacket ever, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's on trend, but it is something cool and it's something unique. And that's definitely something that we can find through secondhand, through vintage, through upcycling something to make it something completely new. But you're right, teenagers don't really care. Like, it's hard to change that perspective. I think it's more looking at, how do I make something that I didn't buy from Zara or I didn't get from Jaded London or Cider or anything like that? How do I find that from what already exists? Because the reality is it does already exist. Like, this probably happened 20 years ago and we've just forgotten about it, and now it's sitting in some charity shop somewhere or on New waiting for you to find it. So it's more like looking at how can we all educate the young generations in a way that makes this appealing. And I think one of those sales points is basically that this is something unique, it's something cool, and it's something that exists. You just got to find it. It's more of like a challenge.
Yeah, and I guess what you can do is, for instance, there might be a dress that they really like, and you could go get some material from a secondhand shop, and then you could get it tailored into the new style. There's always a solution. Or, as a teenager, I used to share outfits with my friends because, buying a new outfit every week is unaffordable and it's unsustainable. So maybe if you're in love with an outfit, buy it, but then lend it to your friends or borrow an outfit from a friend to go to a party or participate in these sharing economy platforms. Rental is a great way to do that as well, where, I went to a wedding yesterday and I rented a dress because I'm only going to wear it once, so then you can give it back. There's so many solutions, and we should never make someone feel guilty about wanting to participate in trends or fashion, but just find a way to do that. And upcycling, you could, again, you can upcycle an outfit and make it on trend, or find, a platform to do that. There's so many.
And one of the great things about rental and sharing is that there are those new designs, there are those new trendier items that are on there. And like, maybe it's not a point of ownership, but it is definitely a point of, I can enjoy this affordably without having to pay for the original item, just for a day or two, and then I can go give it back to the owner. But I'm still experiencing that essence of trendiness, just without having to buy something myself.
Brilliant. Just a point to add, I suppose, or comment on. I don't disagree. I agree in principle that people shouldn't be made to feel guilty for participating in fashion, but I think we should be made aware that participating in fashion is a privilege and not a right. So I think there's that balance of how that changes. Guilt has a place in making people change. Sometimes it's prioritized, but I think, there's that balance. So, finding solutions and different options of doing things, but don't maybe a little smidge of guilt sometimes. No, but I think we should be aware that it's a privilege, not a right, to participate in it.
Oh, 100%. I think it's really important that people know where their clothes are coming from. They know the story, they add value to it. And yeah, of course, we need to, the industry isn't going to change without a little bit of guilt. So it does have a place. But at the same time, I just feel like we shouldn't put this like the guilt on the individual person. There's a lot of brands that need to take accountability. Governments need to implement legislation in place so these changes can be made. It just shouldn't always be on the consumer guild. Yeah,
definitely. There was another question. Yeah.
I'm Lisa. I'm starting a textile within sustainable fashion to kind of get people to use local alterations. But I think something that I'm really struggling with, kind of having worked in textiles for the last 5 years, is already money is really tight. Like, how do you balance the increased cost of sustainable practices, like, sustainable packaging or, bike deliveries or whatever it might be, with, keeping it affordable for consumers? Do you pass it on, or do you kind of make decisions to say, for this thing we're not going to be as sustainable? Like, how do you guys kind of...
Well, I think you've got to be transparent. So if it is more packaging, you need to let consumers know that's why it's more packaging. Most people who are choosing to make ethical choices are aware that sometimes it will cost more. It's about making them aware and giving them the option to choose that. And again, it's not always going to be affordable for everyone, but try to make it in what ways you can, and make it transparency, I guess, is the best thing to do. If people understand why it costs more and they can break it down, then often they'll be like, okay, I understand this. I will pay the extra £2 for ethical, for it to be delivered on bike. And then also, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. I think it's different because the model is different, definitely for us. But we used to be a subscription service, so you would pay a very small amount a month, in all fairness. But we found that this was kind of alienating people who were looking for that really, really affordable way to enjoy fashion. So we were completely free. We allowed people to come on, you would use your clothes as your currency and you can trade things. But as a business, that's obviously very difficult to grow if you have no stream of income. So we were lucky to find some VCs and some angel investors who really believed in our message and definitely gave us that push. And it kind of came to a realization that we do need to introduce a small transaction fee. So again, we were completely transparent with our community and that we want to keep this as small as possible, because our goal at the end of the day is to make this accessible and to make it an affordable way to enjoy fashion. So I think it's definitely been interesting to see with our community, because they do support us so much, that they are willing to continue using, because it is, again, a small amount. But I think the goal is just to be as honest and as transparent with people as possible, because people get it. And I think when you're working towards something good, people will support you and your community will be excited to help out.
Yeah, it's also about changing the values. So, and the way to change values is through transparency. So we need to be like, look, if things are £1, like how, if a garment is £1, how is there any money in it? There's a reason it has to be £5. We have to just educate, and then through education, people understand. And then we change the values, and rather than, again, buying 15 shirts, you buy just one and you pay that extra. It's about changing perception, and that's the key to moving forward in sustainable fashion.
This is my question now, off the back of that question. Is there a place for pay what you can models within these kind of structures? Because obviously they've popped up a lot. I've seen them with kind of theatre and creative sector coming back after COVID, this pay what you can. Is there a place for a model like that? Because though I appreciate we should be changing perception and putting value in things, there is still a sliding scale of affordability within that. So just a question of if there's a place for something like that.
Yeah, so I think that what I've mentioned previously, which we want to roll out, which will probably be in year one at some point, is the fact that you can use what's already in your wardrobe and you can pay the fee to the designer to rework it for you. So in a way that is pay what you can, because you would negotiate that fee with the designer, and I guess there'll be all different price ranges for that. And because you're providing the material, it makes it cheaper that way. So that's the closest we've managed to make a pay what you can, but it is always up to the designer to set their own wage as well and to negotiate with that. I think it's hard because you are talking about people's labor as well. Yeah, but I think that's the closest we can get, and I'm not sure if you have anything to add about.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a look at different models where it could be certain levels of subscription that you get, and you can do X many swaps a month for that. But one thing we found really interesting with subscription models is that older generations definitely prefer subscription because you know that you're going to get so much for it. But younger generations need that kind of instant gratification of I've kind of just paid for this and now I'm going to get something for it, or I've requested this and I'll get it and it's free. So one thing that we definitely want to look at hopefully in the future is either like a kind of freemium model where it's you can use this to an extent and it's completely free, or if it's you can pay a certain amount per month and you can use a platform however much you like. So while the money discussion is difficult, because we do want to make this accessible and something that everyone can enjoy, we gotta pay some salaries sometimes.
I get it.
Yes,
I get
it's
it.
a journey.
Yeah, for sure. And you should be paying people salaries, otherwise we're back where we started. Was there any other questions? That was my cheeky one in there. Yeah?
I've just got a question regarding your swap platform.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are obviously into fast fashion. They've got a lot of these items. I find that half of the stuff in charity shops nowadays is Primark.
Yep.
So that's just what happens. And you want to promote these people coming to your platform, but what would happen if a lot of the items that you are then getting offered for swap are poorly constructed, unethically made? Is that something that you would want to discourage because of those reasons, or kind of promote because it gives these items a second life?
It's a very fine line. So we actually have an approval process. So every item that gets uploaded onto the platform, we'll have a look at and see if it's of a quality that can be repurposed. I think if it's falling apart, or if it's a very plain vest top from Primark, for example, we don't see these things as things that will necessarily find a new home on new. So we will recommend people to donate them to a charity shop, or upcycle them, do different things so we can make sure that these things aren't ending up in landfill. But where we will only accept things that we're very confident will be repurposed at some point. So yes, in that we don't want to alienate fast fashion brands. I think seeing as they're producing so much anyway, we definitely want to make sure that they are finding a new home. But we don't want to take on things that are falling apart or aren't gonna find a new home, because that would reduce the purpose. One thing that we actually do as well is we grade things that are uploaded. So at the moment, you have a silver tier and a gold tier. So your silver tier will be your high street or traditional fast fashion brands, or some cute older vintage things, whereas your gold tier will be those more luxury high-end brands, that really good quality vintage, a Chanel bag, for example. So we make sure that whatever you're putting into the platform, you'll also get out at a similar value, basically. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Can we go there and then there? Thank you. Do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
What do you know about the upcycling of the textiles themselves? So I know that it's extremely difficult to recycle fibres and create new things, but I'm someone who's interested in sustainability from a textiles perspective and the fashion perspective. I'm kind of thinking, well, what happens with those bolts of cloth that go unused, or kind of thing.
Yeah, so we are actually trying to create an index where everything can have an extra life. So we will be collecting materials offcuts, because I guess if you, as you know, with the textile industry, when you get a t-shirt cut, there's all these little offcuts. There are so many designers who can work with that. So we'll be collecting all those materials and keeping them in a warehouse and making it easier for designers to access that, because sometimes as an upcycle designer, if you're an independent designer, it's hard for you to source all these materials, whereas we will do that in the back end and the designers can collect that from us and then continue to produce. Anything that we can't upcycle is not good quality. We'll be working with, like for instance, it can sometimes get stuffed into furniture. We'll be working and trying to create a UK-wide index where everything can go, or people can reference this index online and they can send them themselves, because there isn't currently one, or there isn't enough information on that. So that's part of our grand scheme, because ultimately our mission is to stop textile waste, to provide a solution for designers, to provide a solution for consumers, and to work with brands to put an end to this. But a lot of things can have a home or find a purpose. It's just about finding a place for that. Because, I mean, sometimes even artists could do something with this excess material, but it's just, there's nowhere to access it easily at the moment.
Just a quick one on that as well. That obviously speaks to overproduction of things, which is a different story, I suppose, but there's also technology coming about, and I both agree and disagree with introducing technology to solve problems where you can break down the fibers and then remake it into a new piece of material, but that's only possible if it's a pure blend. So as soon as you go kind of like polyester or 60-30 split, or 60-30, 70-30 split, that's not possible. So I suppose there's where solutions like yours, where you're trying to match things together, don't work. There is technology trying to fill that gap as well, but financial viability of that in the near future, I don't know off the top of my head.
It's very expensive, I heard.
I think the issue with the fashion industry is not going to be solved by one solution. It's going to be a lot of different solutions working cohesively to try and solve it. You know, we can only stop, as resale and upcycle, we can only do a fraction of these industries, but also we shouldn't be providing fast fashions with tools to continue to overproduce. Exactly. They need to be accountable for their own overproduction, and we need to have solutions as well. But yeah, it's a bigger picture. It's a massive conversation.
Your question.
That's my point. I mean, sorry, my English.
No. It's brilliant.
I've been working in sales in Rome for more than 10 years in luxury and then in the retails. And during those years, I've been completely brainwashed. I was like fashion addict completely. Then when I moved here in the UK, I started my journey on a more ethical life in general, and starting reading like the Iraq's from Diana Thomas or Stitch Up, other reading about more fashion ethical life. And when I think about it, and also being here today listening to you, I think like sometimes it's just utopic a little bit, because the change that we need in the fashion system is the change that we need in the society. So it's that big a picture. And I think it's, for us, it's such a big thing for our generation. As the girl said before about the teenager, for example, they follow what is the trend, and the trend, for example, is on social media from like music personalities, for example. If they are always, like, for example, Beyonce, Evie Park, I mean, where that line is coming from, as long as those people are offering that example, those women shave and style and makeup and hair and fake eyelashes, I mean, all of that, it's all connected to fashion. And when I think about it as a person coming from the sales, I think how we can change like the business, the big business like Primark, Zara, all of these massive industries that the market, if the market is ruling our society, how we get to change that things, because we can work as an individual, choosing to something more ethical in every, as us that we are here today, we know what we are trying to do, but how we get to the
stop to this?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer because, again, there's so many different things that need to change. You have said you've started your journey, so has a lot of people, and I think this movement is growing. Through education, we can educate people to make more informed choices, but ultimately, big brands have got to change, and government pressure needs to do that. There needs to be legislation. I think they tried to implement like a tax on fast fashion brands, and the government rejected that. I think it was last year or the year before. But if we put public pressure to introduce these bills, then it puts the pressure onto brands to make these changes, and the industry will start to change. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think if enough people start rallying behind it, we can start to put pressure for change. Also, the EU, like I mentioned, did just implement that brands have to be accountable for their excess material. They can't burn it, they can't put it into landfill anymore, so they have to find solutions. So I think the industry is changing, probably not fast enough, but yeah, it is all interconnected, and it's a massive, massive conversation, but through education, through holding brands accountable, through asking the right questions, and through government pressure, and through technology coming up with solutions, it's all of that kind of has to work together, and people can't lose hope. They've just got to keep putting that pressure on.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about education, that is the biggest thing. I think it's a whole journey of like learning all these new things and learning this is why this happens and this is why these trousers were so cheap. But while I think one side is 100% governmental, like there needs to be more regulations and more legislation behind this, I think another side is massively social. So like you're saying, like you see influencers online with like their fast fashion hauls and like supporting like these random, like completely untransparent supply chains that they're supporting, and having their own brand but having no idea what's going on behind the big picture. And so while one side is definitely we need to put rules on this, I think another side is knowing that the people that you see on Instagram or the people that you see on TikTok are people who can make a conscious choice about who they're shopping with or what's going into the clothing line that they've just released. So it's definitely looking to call for change from those people. Like we see these people with millions and millions of followers, like I hate to bring it up, but Molly May has just been recently been employed as a creative director of Pretty Little Thing, and now she's in a position where she can make a change. So while it sucks to see people who do have such influence and do have so much power working with really super cheap fast fashion brands, the hope is that maybe Molly May can make change. And we can like call, like people listen to communities, and like if you have a fan base that is telling you like this is great, but also you have that responsibility and you have that work that you need to now put in to make sure that what you're doing is ethical and like you have a position to make change within. So yeah, I think governmental, societal, education is key.
Also, sorry if I...
No, please.
Is the profit, because our society is driven by the market, and the market needs the profit. So where we are getting the profit from the ethical fashion, how?
So I think one thing we have to think about is that influencers or the people in charge of big brands are very, 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 very wealthy. I think it's a big boss of a fast fashion brand makes in 4 days what a garment worker makes in their lifetime. So it is a demanding change, and it's knowing that enough people know about the issue within the fashion industry to call upon that change and to demand differences from brands or from influencers or from governments, the people who can make that change. We can all do the small things ourselves, like invest in resale or upcycling and do all these little things, but the big change will come from the top, I think.
Yeah, it's holding brands accountable, and it's asking them questions that they have to answer. And if enough people ask them these questions, they have to answer. And then this information is transparent and people can start to make more informed decisions. It's putting the pressure again on the brands to change and the industry to change. It's hopefully with enough pressure we can make some change, it's a really a lot to kind of bring. It's adding them all together and trying to mix it all together, basically.
I think on that note, I just one point, I think I was told at Lush when I was working there before, I think there's got to be an awareness that you're putting plasters on gaping wounds and you're trying to make things better within a broken system. So I suppose there's one fight that's changing the system. Anti-capitalist in me being like, down with all that. That's one thing. And I think in the meantime, we're trying to make the best of what we have. So there's an awareness that you're almost on two not two different trains of attack, but there's two different things going on, is what I would say. So have realistic expectations of what the plasters are going to do, and then hope for the best with the kind of fundamental system change. On that note, where I get on my soapbox, I think we're at about time. Thank you very much, everyone, for some brilliant
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
questions, and to you guys as well. Thank you.